story. But in the meantime, the Fed will release its minutes of the March meeting on Wednesday. Investors will be listening very carefully for more clues on how long the central bank will hold off raising rates, or if in fact it is considering a rate cut. National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow calling criticism of President Trump's plans to appoint Stephen Moore and Herman Cain to the Fed board as unfair.
President Trump has every right to put people on the Federal Reserve Board with a different point of view. You don't have to rush pell-mell into tightening policy and raising rates just because the economy is growing.
Joining me now to discuss National Taxpayer Union Senior Fellow Mattie Duppler. Mattie, thank you so much for the time. So, quick question. I mean, the Fed has all but said we're on hold for the rest of the year. In fact, the Fed did say that. But what are the chances of a rate cut?
Yeah, so this year will be a little bit different after the hand-wringing of last year, the will they or won't they raise rates. I mean, every little bit of good economic news we got last year was met by market anxiety that would induce the Fed to raise rates. After the March meeting, we know the story is a little bit different. The Fed continued to emphasize patience in the face of economic data, and really the expectation on Fed hikes has been cut quite a bit. There are some expectations out there that there actually could be another cut before there's a hike in the coming years. You know, right now we're looking at one Fed rate hike as the expectation in the last part of this year. But that really, again, we saw from the Fed that the expectation is that they will be data reliant. They'll be listening to the economy. And as that being the case, I don't think that we'll see a ton of surprise in the minutes released today. Really going into that last March meeting, people were wondering whether or not the balance sheet would be a big topic of discussion. Powell, in his comments after that meeting last month, really cleared up what the Fed will be doing in terms of rolling off that balance sheet ending in September. So the next question then is the externalities and the downside effects of the global economy. What happens in China and Brexit certainly was a big topic of conversation. It'll be interesting to see what the minutes have to say about that.
Yeah, and the focus on Europe as well, and obviously Brexit in that neighborhood. But you know, Germany is showing signs of weakening as well, and I think obviously Brexit would certainly be an upset to that region, although President Trump has made it very clear that if the UK does step out of the EU, that the U.S. would be very willing to take a look at trade negotiations and trade deals directly with the UK that are perhaps better than what they have as part of Europe right now. What do you think, though, with the policy, maybe, as you said, Mattie, with less hand-wringing, then does that call more attention to the personalities? So I'm speaking about Herman Cain, the fact that he took so much public criticism about suggesting at one point that the U.S. go back to basing the dollar on gold, for example.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, it's interesting, the criticism about Herman Cain and the other nominee to the Federal Reserve. The court of public opinion isn't important here. It's really the hearings that happen in the United States Senate. It's up to United States senators to decide whether or not these two individuals are qualified. You know, the real question, though, of course, all this criticism about President Trump and whether or not it's appropriate for him to nominate economists and people who agree with him. Well, look at the other people he's nominated to the board, specifically the chairman himself, Jay Powell, who is obviously has taken a little bit more of a hawkish view than the president would prefer. I think that in an alternate universe,
independently is what you mean.
Well, in an alternate universe too, you can see this as a balancing act, right? You've got Powell and Clarida who are a little bit more hawkish. You've got folks who have expressed contentment with the Trump economic policies being nominated for the board now. It seems to me that would be actually a good response, a good balancing of the personalities there.
There are diverse opinions. Mattie, thanks as always.
Thanks, Deirdre.
Mattie Duppler joining us there. Well, stocks are mixed as we head towards this final hour of trading. Tech companies facing huge